Are you okay?
Hey, sweet chocolate, you spill that coffee on me and I'll have you mopping floors in my office for free. That line hit harder than the thunder rolling over the skyline of New Orleans. Inside Marla's diner, where the coffee's burnt and the dreams come with a side of fries, Zariah Monroe didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. That kind of comment wasn't rare, it was regular, especially when you were young, black, and wearing a name tag. But this wasn't just another night. Outside, rain slammed the pavement like it had a score to settle. The neon sign of the diner flickered against puddles that mirrored the city's broken beauty. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed softly above worn-out booths and greasy menus. Zariah moved through it all like poetry fluid, warm, unbothered. Her smile lit up the place, not because it was her job, but because it was her shield. Her uniform was pressed, her sneakers clean. She had that kind of beauty that made you look twice and then feel guilty for staring too long. Still, the respect wasn't there. Tonight's crowd? Wall Street wannabes in borrowed suits, slamming down beers like they'd just won something. Spoiler, they hadn't. One of them made that comment. Loud enough for his friends to laugh, but low enough to pretend it was a joke. Zariah didn't answer, just kept moving. But then came table 7. He didn't laugh, didn't order, just sat in silence. A man wrapped in a storm-colored trench coat, fingertips tapping a broken Maserati key like a metronome for trouble. He looked expensive. Dangerous. The kind of man who owned more property than he had friends. She approached his table with her usual grace. "Car won't start," he muttered, eyes not even meeting hers. "Battery's dead." "I got jumper cables in my trunk," she replied calmly, like she was offering ketchup. "Want some help?" He looked up, actually looked at her. A second of confusion, then disbelief. A black waitress offering to help, not asking for it. Still, he nodded. And that, right there, was the ignition point. What Zariah didn't know was that she was helping start more than just a car. She was about to collide head-on with Saxon Vale, the billionaire CEO of Vale Corp. Ruthless, feared. The kind of man who'd fire 5,000 employees before breakfast and spin it as corporate efficiency. And what Saxon didn't know, he was about to meet a force far stronger than capital. He was about to meet character, real character. The kind that doesn't come from wealth but from survival. This isn't just another tale of rags and riches, it's a black story, one of grit, dignity, and power that doesn't wear a Rolex. So, if you're into stories where kindness beats cruelty and truth finds its voice in the unlikeliest places, stick with us. This is Hidden Worth, and tonight, we're starting a fire with jumper cables and a whole lot of purpose. Let's get into it. Every night, right at 10, Zariah Monroe tied her apron tight, slipped her phone into the front pocket, and stepped onto the black and white checkered floor of Marla's diner, like she was stepping into a play where she already knew the ending. The lights inside never changed. The same flickering fluorescent bulbs buzzed above, the same booths with peeling vinyl, the same rusty bell above the door that chimed whenever a customer came in or trouble walked through. But it wasn't the setting that drained her. It was the roles people assigned her. To some, she was invisible. To others, she was just, "Hey girl, sweetheart," or "you people." She didn't have a name unless she was carrying someone's check or wiping down a mess they made. The tips were inconsistent. The stares were always the same. Some nights were bearable. She'd get the occasional kind couple, the weary trucker who left a 20 for a $5 coffee. But most nights, it was sarcasm wrapped in entitlement. Drunk frat boys snapping their fingers like she was a show dog. Businessmen asking if she was from around here, with that tone the kind that danced on the edge of something unspoken. Once, a woman looked her dead in the eye and asked if she could touch her hair, as if Zariah was an exhibit in a museum instead of a human being. Still, Zariah smiled. She always smiled. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Because every shift meant groceries on the table. It meant her little sister Nia could keep her braces. It meant they could keep the lights on for another week. Zariah didn't dream about luxury. She dreamed about stability, about breathing room. Marla's wasn't the worst job in the world, but it felt like a trap. The schedule was punishing, 10 at night until 6 in the morning. the kind of hours that swallowed your social life whole. Her feet ached before midnight. By 3 a.m., she was running on nothing but black coffee and muscle memory. The kitchen was always hot, even in winter. The grill hissed, the fryer popped, and the air was thick with the smell of grease and frustration. Her manager, Chuck, was a man who smiled too wide and listened too little. He wasn't openly racist, just casually biased in that old-school way that made you second-guess every word. He called her Z instead of Zariah, always gave the best sections to the white servers, and when something went wrong, it was almost always her fault. One night, the coffee was too cold. Chuck didn't ask who brewed it. He just barked, "Fix it, Z." She fixed it, like she fixed everything, silently. And then there were the other girls. Becky, who got more shifts. Lindsay, who made more in tips. They weren't mean, just distant. Like Zariah existed in a different orbit. As if being black in that diner was a job all on its own. Zariah didn't complain. She was too busy surviving. Her rent was $1,100 a month. The used car she drove needed a new alternator. Nia's school fees were piling up. But instead of breaking down, Zariah broke through. Every break she got, she pulled out her phone and studied. She watched YouTube videos on engine repairs. She read manuals. She learned the difference between torque and timing belts. She taught herself, little by little. Because Zariah had a dream, not a wish, not a fantasy. She wanted to open an auto repair shop, one just for women, especially young black women who were tired of being underestimated. A place where they could learn, grow, and build something real, something theirs. But first, she had to make it through another night. Tonight, she'd already cleaned up a spill no one owned up to. She'd smiled through a customer accusing her of getting his order wrong. He hadn't even read the menu. She'd watched Lindsay pocket a $30 tip from a table Zariah had served first. Chuck didn't notice. Or maybe he did. Maybe he just didn't care. At around 2:45 a.m., she got 10 minutes to sit in the break room. The vinyl chair stuck to her arms. Her legs throbbed. Her phone buzzed. Nia had texted, "Can we get breakfast tomorrow? I miss you." Zariah stared at the screen. Her throat tightened. She hadn't had a proper meal with her sister in over a week. Always too tired. Always chasing the next paycheck. She typed back, "Yes." That yes would cost her sleep, maybe even energy she didn't have, but it was worth it. Because despite everything, Zariah Monroe was not broken. Bent, maybe. Worn down, sure, but not broken. And on this one rainy night in New Orleans, fate was finally about to notice her. Next up, a dead car battery, a billionaire, and a moment that would change her life. All because she refused to stop being helpful, even when the world refused to be kind. Saxon Vale didn't belong in a place like Marla's diner, not by a long shot. He usually dined in rooms where the steak came with a wine pairing and the server knew your name before you sat down. His suits were tailored, his watches cost more than some people's yearly rent, and his circle was small by design. Privacy wasn't a luxury, it was a shield, one he used to stay 3 moves ahead of everyone else. That night in New Orleans, he wasn't dressed for business. He wasn't dressed for headlines either. His coat was soaked, his shirt was open at the collar, and his usual armor of composure was wearing thin. He looked like a man in hiding, and in many ways, he was. Less than 48 hours earlier, Saxon had walked out of a boardroom at Vale Corp headquarters in Manhattan, with blood on his hands, figuratively speaking. He'd just executed one of the largest cost-cutting restructures the company had ever seen. 2,000 employees laid off, 5 divisions dissolved. Wall Street called it brilliant. His PR team called it bold. But the internet? The internet called him a monster. Memes, think pieces, employee videos. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons. So, he did what he always did when the fire got too hot. He disappeared. New Orleans wasn't a planned stop. It was a last-minute detour. His private jet had landed at Louis Armstrong International late that evening, and a car had taken him downtown. The hotel suite was quiet. Too quiet. So he walked. No guards, no assistants, no briefcase. Just Saxon and the rain. He didn't know why he went into the diner. Maybe it was the neon lights. Maybe it was the smell of bacon and coffee. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Whatever the reason, He found himself sitting in a cracked booth, listening to his Maserati key fob click uselessly against the tabletop. He wasn't just hiding from the media. He was hiding from himself. See, Saxon Vale didn't build Vale Corp. He inherited it. His father, Gerald Vale, had been the kind of man who ran boardrooms like war zones. Saxon grew up with power, privilege, and pressure so thick it could crush bone. By the time he was 26, he was CEO. By 30, he'd already shut down 3 factories, doubled shareholder profits, and developed a reputation that made even seasoned executives nervous. But what people didn't know, what no one knew, was that Saxon wasn't sleeping anymore. He saw the faces of people he didn't know, employees with families, mortgages, and dreams, people who cried in elevators when they got the news, people whose names never showed up in earnings reports. He told himself it was necessary, that this was business, that the world was hard and only the ruthless survived. And yet, something about that diner, the rust, the warmth, the honesty felt like an alternate universe, a place where no one cared who you were as long as you paid your check and didn't cause trouble. That's where he first saw her, Zariah Monroe. She wasn't like anyone he'd met in corporate life. She wasn't trying to sell anything, impress anyone, or climb some invisible ladder. She moved with purpose. She listened more than she spoke. And when she offered to help him with his car, not with fear, not with flirtation, but with confidence, it threw him off completely. People didn't help Saxon Vale. They served him, feared him, sometimes envied him. But help, real, unsolicited help, that was rare. That was almost unsettling. He didn't tell her who he was, didn't need to. Most people recognized him by the time he opened his mouth. But Zariah didn't blink. She didn't ask. She didn't treat him like someone who mattered. And that was exactly what made her unforgettable. What Saxon didn't know yet, what he hadn't begun to realize, was that this moment, this woman, this night, would be the first crack in a wall he'd spent decades building. A wall made of titles, money, and silence. And Zariah? She had jumper cables strong enough to bring more than just his car back to life. The rain had slowed, but the streets were still soaked, glistening under the soft yellow of the diner's parking lot lights. Steam rose from the pavement in low curls as the night air cooled down. Marla's diner buzzed behind them, a mix of coffee machines and distant laughter. Out front, it was just Saxon Vale and Zariah Monroe, 2 strangers, standing in the shadows of a soaked New Orleans night. Zariah walked ahead, her steps quick and confident despite the water pooling around her sneakers. She popped open the trunk of her old Corolla with a quiet grunt and reached in, pulling out a worn set of jumper cables. Saxon stood back, watching. "You done this before?" he asked. She shot him a look over her shoulder. "Only about 100 times. My car used to die twice a week before I learned how to fix it myself." There was no pride in her voice. Just fact. Clean and sharp. Zariah moved to his car, sleek, matte black, low to the ground, and popped the hood like she'd done it her whole life. Her hands moved with certainty. The cables clicked together with that familiar snap, red to positive, black to negative. Saxon watched closely, but didn't speak. She was in control, and that unsettled him more than he expected. "All right," she said, brushing her damp curls away from her face. "Start her up." Saxon slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed, then roared to life like it had been waiting for her touch. He stepped back out and shut the door. "Looks like you've got a gift." Zariah shrugged. "Nah, just tired of being stuck." They stood there for a moment, the silence filling the space between them. The engine hummed behind them. Her Corolla, dented and sun-faded, looked like it had been through a war. His car looked like it had never seen a bad day. "You want something for your trouble?" he asked finally. Zariah's face didn't change. "No, I didn't do it for that." "You sure?" He reached for his wallet. "Don't insult me." He froze, not from offense, from surprise. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't frowned. She just said it like truth, like law. He put the wallet away. Zariah stepped back, pulled the cables off with practiced care, and coiled them into her arms. Her hands were quick, even graceful. She was soaked to the knees, but her back was straight, her jaw set. "You know," she said, I used to think people with cars like that didn't need help from folks like me. Saxon didn't respond. But I'm starting to think everybody's got something broken. Some folks just hide it better. She shut her trunk with a dull thud and looked at him. Not through him. At him. Anyway, you're good to go. She turned to leave, the streetlight catching the glint of her wet shoes. The moment was over. The act was done. But Saxon wasn't ready to let her walk away. Not yet. What's your name? He asked. She paused, then looked back. Zariah. Zariah, he repeated, like it meant something. Thank you. You're welcome, she said. Whoever you are. And with that, she walked back toward the diner, her silhouette shrinking beneath the dripping awning. Saxon stood there a minute longer, staring at the spot where she'd stood. The storm inside him was louder than the one outside. He didn't know why, but something had shifted. Maybe it was the way she spoke with no fear. Maybe it was the way she refused the money like it was poison. Maybe it was just her being real in a world where nothing around him was. Whatever it was, Saxon Vale, billionaire, strategist, master of cold calculations, was left staring at his running engine like it had answered a question he didn't know he had asked. He got in but didn't drive away. Instead, he reached for his phone and stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, for the first time in months, he opened the camera app, not to post, not for PR, but to remember. He snapped a picture of the diner, rain on the glass, lights glowing warm inside. It wasn't for the story he would tell. It was for the one he had just stepped into. Zariah stepped off the curb with her hoodie pulled tight over her head. The rain had picked back up, steady and cold, slicing through the early morning air like needles. Her shift was finally over. Her legs were sore, her back ached, and the thought of her warm but tiny apartment was the only thing pushing her forward. The streets were quiet now. The drunken crowds had thinned. Most of the bars had closed, and the only sounds were the occasional passing car and the rhythmic slap of her wet sneakers on the pavement. She didn't mind the walk. It gave her space to think, to breathe. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, another text from Nia. You still coming home? Zariah smiled faintly and typed back, on my way. She turned the corner, the diner now out of sight behind her. Ahead, the road stretched out in slick sheets of blacktop and streetlights. A car passed fast, too fast, and swerved just enough to hit the edge of the curb. A tidal wave of dirty rainwater shot from the gutter and slammed into her legs, soaking her jeans from thigh to ankle. She gasped and stumbled back. The car didn't stop, just kept going, red taillights glowing like the eyes of something heartless. Zariah stood there for a second, teeth clenched, her hands fists at her sides. The water dripped from her cuffs, cold, heavy, unfair. She took a breath, then another. This wasn't new. It was just life being life again. She kept walking. Then she heard a car slow behind her. Not fast, not aggressive, just careful. She turned her head, ready to snap at whoever it was another prank, another drive-by insult. But it wasn't that. It was the black Maserati. The driver's window rolled down slowly, and Saxon Vale leaned slightly across the seat. You good? He asked. Zariah hesitated. I'm fine, she said, brushing a wet curl out of her face. Let me give you a ride. I don't take rides from strangers, she replied flatly. Fair, he said, but technically, I'm not a stranger. You just fixed my car. She stared at him. I'm not trying to make this weird, he added. I'm just offering a ride. You helped me, least I can do. She hesitated for a beat longer, then nodded once and opened the passenger door. Inside, the car smelled like leather and pine. Warm air hummed from the vents, and for the first time all night, Zariah felt her fingers start to thaw. She buckled her seatbelt. Straight up, Claiborne, then left on Esplanade, she said. I'll tell you where to stop. Saxon nodded and eased the car forward. They drove in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just quiet. I wasn't expecting to see you still out, he said finally. Shift ended late, bus never comes on time, usual stuff. You walk that far every night? She looked at him sideways. Is this an interview? No, he said. Just learning. She smirked. You don't seem like the kind of guy who has to learn much. You'd be surprised. Rain tapped gently on the windshield. Streetlights flicked past, casting shadows over their faces. Zariah relaxed slightly in the seat. The warmth was seeping into her bones, and the exhaustion was catching up. I'm not used to people like you offering rides, she said after a while. What kind of people am I? Rich, white, important. He looked over. You forgot grateful. She gave him a look. Are you? I am, he said simply. More silence. Then Zariah spoke again. You ever been in a place where no one notices you until you mess up? Yes, he said quietly. That surprised her. She expected some corporate platitude, some cold answer about leadership or business, but there was something real in his voice. She nodded. Then you know how heavy that gets. They turned left. Her building was coming up a squat, faded brick apartment complex with bars on the windows and 2 broken mailboxes hanging open. She pointed. Right there's good. Saxon pulled over and put the car in park. Zariah unbuckled. Thanks for the ride, she said, opening the door. He nodded, then asked, You want to do something else with those skills? She paused. What? You're clearly more than a waitress. Her face shifted, a mix of suspicion and curiosity. I'm serious, he said. I think you've got something rare. If you're ever open to something bigger, let me know. She stepped out, still unsure if he was real or just another rich man talking like a savior. Night, stranger, she said with a slight smile. Then the door shut, and Saxon sat watching as she disappeared into the building, one slow step at a time. And just like that, she was gone. But she had left something behind in that car, an idea. One that Saxon Vale couldn't shake. The next morning, sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite at the Four Seasons Hotel in New Orleans. The city outside was alive with honking horns, streetcar bells, and the scent of fresh beignets drifting in from the quarter. Inside, Saxon Vale sat at a dining table made of Italian marble, untouched breakfast spread out in front of him. Eggs, toast, fresh squeezed orange juice. Nothing tasted like anything. He had been up since 5 a.m., his mind circling back to one thing: Zariah Monroe. It wasn't infatuation. It wasn't charity. It was something else, something deeper. He couldn't explain it. She had stirred something in him. Not just because she fixed his car, not even because she turned down his money. It was the way she looked at him. Like she saw through him. That almost never happened. Saxon lived in a world designed to protect him from discomfort. The elevator in his Manhattan penthouse opened directly into his private residence. He hadn't stood in a line in over 10 years. His calendar was managed to the second. If his coffee was too cold, someone lost their job. If his mood was off, no one dared ask why. Everything was polished, curated, fake. But Zariah had been real. Real enough to remind him that there was a life outside of private jets and silent boardrooms. A life where people didn't smile because they had to. They smiled because they chose to, even when the world gave them every reason not to. He stood and walked over to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Zariah was probably back on her feet, working another shift, helping her sister, living a life far harder than his own and doing it with more grace than most of the executives he paid 7 figures a year. His assistant, David, knocked gently before stepping inside. Morning, sir. Board has been pushing for a statement. The layoffs are making waves. Saxon didn't turn around. Draft something neutral. Emphasize restructuring, innovation. Say we're streamlining to better serve emerging markets. David hesitated. And the internal morale hit? We'll spin it. The assistant nodded and turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. A reporter from the Ledger reached out. They're doing a piece on your time away from the city. They heard about you being here. Saxon finally turned. Tell them I'm on personal leave, no comment. David left, and Saxon sat back down, finally touching his coffee. It was cold, of course it was. He set it aside and pulled out his phone. For a moment, his thumb hovered over the call log, Then he tapped into his browser and searched for her. Zariah Monroe. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. A social media page, a business, a story. But there was nothing. No LinkedIn, no articles, no YouTube channel. Just a few blurry posts on a local diner's Facebook page, her taking orders, her smiling at some kid, her wearing the same uniform from last night. The gap between their worlds had never felt so wide. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Back in Manhattan, his life was waiting lawyers, investors, board meetings, everything perfectly measured, yet meaningless. He had spent the last decade building Valecorp into a global machine. It didn't care who you were or what you needed. It only cared about efficiency. He used to be proud of that, used to think it meant power. Now, it felt hollow. What was the point of being a billionaire if you couldn't even change one person's life for the better? But he knew the rules. If he tried to help her outright, it would come off wrong. He'd be accused of buying redemption, using her for image rehab, maybe even exploiting her. So, if he was going to help, it had to be on her terms. He opened a new note and started typing. Program proposal, Community Mechanics Initiative. Partner with local garages. Provide free auto training to women from underserved communities. Equipment grants and stipends included. Pilot location, New Orleans. He stopped, looked at the words. Zariah had told him she didn't want anything. But maybe, just maybe, she'd accept an opportunity. And for once, Saxon Vale wanted to build something that didn't come with profit margins, something that came with impact. Not for press, not for shareholders. For her. The video wasn't meant to go viral. It started as a grainy clip taken from a dashcam parked across the street from Marla's diner. The footage wasn't cinematic. It didn't have filters or flashy edits. Just a simple, rainy night, a black Maserati with the hood popped open, and a young black woman in a diner uniform hooking up jumper cables like it was second nature. You could barely hear the muffled sounds of her voice over the rain, but you could see her face clearly. Calm, focused. No drama, no performance. The uploader had added a short caption. This waitress helped a guy in a $200 Kelvin's car with no hesitation. This world needs more people like her. Within 12 hours, the video had 10,000 views. Within 24 hours, it hit 200,000. By the end of the week, it had crossed 3 million. People didn't just watch it, they shared it, commented, argued, celebrated. She didn't even ask for money. That's real character. Black women carry this country on their backs, period. Who is she? Someone get her a scholarship or something. A popular influencer stitched the clip on TikTok and added their own commentary. This isn't just a story about kindness, it's about how people who get overlooked every day still show up for others, even when the world doesn't show up for them. Hashtags flooded in. Number Zariah the mechanic, number Black excellence, number everyday hero, number hidden worth. Nobody knew her name at first, but internet sleuths were relentless. By day 3, someone tracked her down through a diner menu post and a tagged comment. By day 5, her face was everywhere. Local news stations came knocking, then national outlets, then online magazines. Everyone wanted a piece of the hero waitress. Zariah was overwhelmed. She'd never wanted attention, never chased the spotlight. She just wanted to get home dry and maybe get enough tips to cover the power bill. Now, people were calling her inspirational. There were GoFundMe campaigns popping up without her permission, strangers asking for interviews. A producer from LA pitched a documentary. She didn't know how to process it. When the news team showed up at Marla's, Chuck tried to take credit for nurturing local talent. Zariah gave him a side-eye that nearly melted the mic. Her manager offered to represent her during interviews. She declined. Nia, on the other hand, was thriving. Z, she said, eyes wide with excitement. You're trending on like 6 platforms, they love you. I just jumped a car, Zariah replied, folding laundry. Yeah, but you did it with class, Nia said, throwing a towel at her. You looked good, you didn't flinch, and you didn't take his money. That's queen behavior. Zariah rolled her eyes, but deep down, she was shaken. The fame didn't feel like success. It felt like exposure, like every part of her life was under a microscope she didn't ask for. What if people found out about the overdue rent? What if they judged her for working 2 jobs? What if they stopped cheering once the next viral video hit? But then something else happened. An email came in from Vale Corp. No sender name, just a message. You made an impression. If you ever want to work with your hands and your mind, we've got a place for you. SV. Attached was a flyer, Community Mechanics Initiative, launching in New Orleans, training scholarships for women in underserved communities, sponsored by Vale Foundation. Zariah stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't need anyone to explain the initials. She knew exactly who it was from. She thought about deleting the email. Then she thought about Nia. About all the other girls like her, working night shifts and holding back dreams because rent was louder than ambition. She picked up her phone and called the number listed at the bottom of the flyer. "Hi," she said when someone answered. "My name's Zariah Monroe. I'm calling about the mechanics program. I'm not looking for charity, but I am looking for a way to build something real." The voice on the other end smiled through the phone. "Then you called the right place." The video kept spreading, but now, the story had more chapters. Headlines shifted from "Waitress Saves Billionaire" to "Waitress Launches Training Program for Women," and from "Jumper Cables to Blueprints, Zariah Monroe's Impact." Saxon never took credit. He didn't need to. Zariah was doing something far more powerful than being a headline. She was becoming a leader. One who reminded the world that real worth isn't measured in money but in the way you treat people when no one's watching. The fame came fast, and it came hard. At first, Zariah thought things would get easier. A few interviews, some encouraging messages, a couple of viral hashtags, maybe it'd all pass like a summer storm. But when she walked into Marla's diner that Friday night, it was clear something had shifted, and not in a good way. The usual low murmur of kitchen prep and silverware clinking had an edge to it. Her co-workers fell quiet the second she stepped through the back door. Becky wouldn't make eye contact. Lindsay gave her a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Even the dishwasher, Reggie, who used to play gospel music on his speaker, kept his head down and earbuds in. Zariah clocked in and tied her apron, pretending not to notice. But she noticed everything. Her section had been changed. Instead of her regular booths near the window, where the tips were solid and the regulars knew her name, Chuck had reassigned her to the back corner, near the kitchen. The dead zone. The section where the lights flickered, the floor was sticky, and customers rarely stayed longer than 10 minutes. She approached him quietly. "Chuck, is this a mistake? My section?" He didn't look up from his clipboard. "New schedule rotation. But I've been on window for months." "You think you're special now?" he asked, still not looking at her. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're on TikTok, news articles, probably signing autographs soon," he said with a smirk. "Figured you'd want to share the spotlight. Give the rest of us a chance." Zariah stared at him. "So this is a punishment?" He shrugged. "Call it a reminder." She didn't respond, didn't push, just walked away. But inside, something cracked. The rest of the night followed the same pattern. Lindsay accidentally deleted one of her orders from the system. Becky rolled her eyes every time Zariah asked for help. Reggie bumped into her twice and didn't say sorry. The customers were even stranger. A couple asked if she was the jumper cable girl. A guy filmed her while she took his order, pretending to text. One woman left a note on the receipt: "Use that fame to get a real job." Zariah forced a smile, forced calm, but her hands shook when she poured coffee. Her throat tightened every time someone whispered her name behind her back. This wasn't jealousy, it was resentment. Her coworkers had decided she'd become too big for the diner, too seen, too important. And people like Chuck didn't like when the balance of power shifted. He'd built his small kingdom on routine and silence. Zariah had shattered that the moment the world saw her worth. During her break, she sat outside on the curb, the cold from the concrete seeping through her jeans. She sipped lukewarm coffee and stared at the sky. No stars tonight, just clouds and a rising wind. She unlocked her phone and opened her messages. Nia had texted, "They're talking about you in class today. Proud of you." Zariah smiled weakly. Then the next message hit harder. "Saw some girl on Insta say you only helped that guy for clout, that you knew who he was the whole time. Her stomach dropped. She checked online. Sure enough, someone had posted a clip claiming she staged the moment with Saxon Vale, that it was all a setup to get famous. A few users piled on, accusing her of being an opportunist, attention seeker, and fake woke. Zariah shut the app and exhaled slowly. The internet had turned just as fast as it had cheered. That's when Saxon called. She almost didn't answer. "Hey," she said quietly. "I saw the post," he said. "Of course you did. I can make a statement, clear it up." "No," she said, sharper than she meant to. "Don't. That'll just make it worse. You shouldn't have to go through this." "Well, I am," she said, "and you know what? It's not new. It's just louder now." There was silence on the line. Then Saxon said, "You're stronger than they are." She smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Strong gets exhausting." "I know." "Do you?" He paused. "Not like you do, but I'm learning." Zariah didn't respond right away. "Thanks for calling," she said finally. "I'll figure it out." And she did. Not by fighting back online. Not by quitting. But by showing up the next night, and the night after that, smiling when it was hardest, working harder than ever, earning respect the long way again. Because that's what people like her had always done. And no amount of backlash could undo the truth of who she was. Zariah wasn't expecting the envelope. It came on a rainy Tuesday, tucked neatly into her mailbox between an overdue electricity bill and a flyer for discounted dental work. The paper was thick, the kind of heavy stock that smelled faintly of something expensive. Her name was printed on the front, neat, centered, no frills. Just Zariah Monroe. She opened it with one hand while stirring noodles on the stove with the other. Nia sat at the counter, sketching on a pad of paper, earbuds in, humming to herself. It was just another night in their tiny apartment. The place wasn't much secondhand furniture, walls that needed repainting, a heater that clanked like it hated working, but it was home. Inside the envelope was a single letter, cream-colored paper, embossed logo at the top. Vale Corp. Zariah's breath caught. Her eyes skimmed the words. "We are writing to formally offer you a position within the Vale Foundation's new automotive training initiative. Based on your skill set, work ethic, and the leadership you've demonstrated, we believe you would be the perfect candidate to lead our pilot program in New Orleans." She read it twice, then a third time. Led? It wasn't just an invitation to join. It was an offer to run something, to shape it, to build it from the ground up. There was more. The role includes salary, benefits, relocation support if needed, and full creative control over program development. You'll be working directly with our foundation leadership and community outreach teams. We believe in your vision, and we want to help bring it to life. It was signed, simply, S. Vale. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the letter down. "Z?" Nia looked up. "You okay?" Zariah stared at the words for a moment longer, then folded the paper carefully. "Yeah," she said. "I'm okay." But she wasn't. She was overwhelmed. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a door. For years, Zariah had dreamed of something like this. She'd spent nights watching repair videos, taking notes, building small engines out of scraps in their hallway. She'd sketched out plans for a women-led garage on napkins during her breaks. She wanted to change the industry, not just fix cars, but fix how people like her were seen in that space. Now, someone was offering her the keys. Still, doubt crept in. Why her? Why now? Was this really about her potential, or was she just another good headline for Vale Corp? She texted Saxon, "Got your letter." His reply came quickly. "It's not charity, it's a beginning." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat at the window that night, watching rain dance on the glass, thinking about everything that had happened. She remembered the feeling of cold water soaking her legs the night she jumped his car. She remembered the looks from coworkers who resented her success. She remembered how it felt to be invisible until suddenly, she wasn't. Zariah didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to matter. This offer, it might be the first real chance she'd had to do that. The next morning, she took the bus to Vale Corp's downtown office. The building was everything you'd expect: glass, chrome, sleek security desks, people walking fast with expensive shoes. She didn't belong here, not yet. But she walked in anyway. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Miss Monroe, they're expecting you upstairs." She rode the elevator to the 27th floor, palms damp, heart hammering. The doors opened into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a panoramic view of the city she knew like the back of her hand. And there he was. Saxon Vale, dressed simply, no tie, no entourage. He stood when she entered. "Zariah," he said, "thank you for coming." She nodded, guarded. "So, what's the catch?" "No catch," he replied. "You've got a vision. We have resources. I want to help you make something real. That's it." "I'm not a figurehead," she said. "If I do this, I want full control. No photo ops, no media circus. You've got it. And I want it to be about the girls who never get a shot, not about me." "Even better," he said. "That's exactly why we need you." Zariah sat down across from him, took a breath. "Then let's talk details." And just like that, a new chapter began. Not because someone gave her power, but because she took it. Zariah didn't wear a suit. She thought about it briefly, but that wasn't her. Instead, she wore a crisp white blouse, navy slacks, and the same worn leather boots she'd owned for 5 years. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, and she wore no jewelry except a small gold pendant that had belonged to her mother. This wasn't about blending in. It was about showing up exactly as she was. The Vale Corp tower downtown shimmered in the morning sun like it knew it was important. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity. Glass walls, polished floors, and digital displays showing stock tickers and mission statements. People in tailored clothes moved quickly, eyes locked on screens, voices clipped and controlled. Zariah didn't rush. A receptionist greeted her and escorted her to a private elevator that led to the executive floors. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet, minimalist hallway lined with abstract art and soft lighting. At the far end, double glass doors led into the boardroom. She paused at the threshold, exhaled once, and pushed them open. The room was long, with a view that spanned the entire city. A massive oak table stretched through the center, surrounded by 10 chairs, 8 of them filled. She recognized Saxon immediately, sitting at the head. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were alert. To his right sat a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp glasses. On the left, a younger man in a checkered blazer scrolled through his tablet. The rest of the faces were unfamiliar, older, polished, and, for the most part, white. Zariah walked in, spine straight. "Zariah Monroe," Saxon announced, gesturing toward the empty seat at the far end. "Thank you for joining us." She nodded politely and took her seat. There was a pause, the kind that fills a room when people are deciding how serious to be. Then the silver-haired woman spoke. "I'm Diana Mercer, Director of Social Initiatives. We've reviewed your background. Your story has reached millions." Zariah didn't smile. "I didn't go viral on purpose." A soft chuckle ran through the room. "We're not here to discuss the internet," another board member said, an older man with a navy suit and a voice like gravel. "We're here to understand what you intend to do with this program. You'll be working with significant resources." Zariah leaned forward. "I want to create a training space where young women, especially women of color, can learn automotive skills without judgment. I want them to feel respected in a field that rarely makes space for them." Diana tilted her head. "And how do you plan to scale that vision?" "One garage at a time," Zariah replied. "Hands-on, community first. This isn't about franchises. This is about access, trust, giving women the tools to take control of their lives." The man in the checkered blazer looked up. "Do you have management experience?" Zariah didn't flinch. "No, but I've worked 16-hour shifts, managed a household since I was 17, and taught myself how to fix cars using a cracked tablet and YouTube. So no management title, just management life." Silence again. This time, longer. Then Saxon spoke. "She's not here because of a resume. She's here because she's already doing the work without the title, without the funding, and without the privilege." Another board member leaned forward. Let's be honest, there's PR value here, but there's also risk. What happens if this initiative fails? Zariah answered before Saxon could. Then I fail loud and publicly, but I'd rather fail trying to build something real than succeed pretending I belong in a boardroom more than I belong in a garage. That landed. Diana looked around the room. Do we really want another initiative that's safe and forgettable? Or do we want something that actually matters? A few heads nodded slowly. Saxon glanced at Zariah, then leaned forward. Let's vote. The motion passed. Unanimously. Zariah was now officially the director of the New Orleans chapter of Vale Corp's Community Mechanics Initiative. As the meeting wrapped, board members offered polite congratulations. Some were more genuine than others. The man with the gravel voice gave her a firm handshake and said, "Don't let them soften you." She didn't plan to. Saxon walked her to the elevator. "You handled that well," he said. "They didn't scare me. I could tell." She pressed the elevator button. "You ready for this?" he asked. Zariah looked at him, her eyes clear. "I've been ready. The world's just finally watching." The doors opened, and she stepped inside. No fanfare. No applause. Just a woman with grease under her nails and fire in her heart, heading into a future she was about to build with her own two hands. Success, Zariah was learning, didn't just bring opportunity, it also brought shadows. 2 weeks into her new role, the garage was humming with energy. The floors were spotless, the toolboxes organized, and the walls painted a bold steel gray with bright yellow accents, colors she'd chosen herself. Posters of female mechanics, inspirational quotes, and framed newspaper clippings of her viral video decorated the entrance. The program had launched faster than expected. Word had spread. Applications came in from every neighborhood in New Orleans. Young women, single mothers, veterans, even teenagers fresh out of high school. They all wanted a chance, and Zariah gave it to them. But not everyone was cheering. One Thursday morning, she arrived early, as always. The sun was barely up, and the streets were quiet. Her coffee steamed in one hand, keys jangling in the other. As she unlocked the front door to the shop, something felt off. The smell hit her first: burnt rubber and gasoline. Then she saw it. The training car they'd been working on, a 2009 Ford Fusion donated by a local dealership, was covered in slashed tires, its hood pried open. Oil had been dumped across the floor, dark and slick. Someone had shattered the windshield with a crowbar. The glass sparkled under the fluorescent lights like cruel confetti. She stood frozen. Not because of the damage, but because she knew exactly what this was. This was a message. Someone wanted her gone. She called the police, filed the report, took the questions, gave her statement. When they asked if she had any enemies, she almost laughed. "Just people uncomfortable with change," she said. Later that day, the security footage confirmed it. 2 masked individuals had broken in through the back alley entrance. They moved like they knew the space. Quick, quiet, precise. Whoever it was, they weren't amateurs. She didn't tell the students. She didn't want fear clouding their sense of purpose, so she kept the shop open, cleaned up the mess, and had the car towed. By the time her first trainee arrived, the garage looked as good as new, at least on the surface. But inside, Zariah was on edge. That night, she got a call. Blocked number. She let it go to voicemail, but the message was short and shook her anyway. "Stay in your lane, girl. Some doors ain't meant for you." She didn't play it for Saxon, not yet. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she needed to handle it her way. Quietly, directly. 2 days later, a man from her past walked through the door. Ruben. She hadn't seen him in years. They used to work together at a gas station before Marla's. He taught her how to change brake pads. She taught him how to treat women without being a jerk. He'd changed. New gold chain, sharp jacket. A way of looking around like he was always calculating. "Z," he said, arms open like they were still friends. "Heard you were doing big things." She didn't smile. "What do you want, Ruben?" He whistled, pretending to admire the space. "Nice setup. Vale Corp money must be sweet." "You didn't answer my question." Ruben shrugged. Word is you're hiring. I know cars. Figured I'd come by. Zariah folded her arms. Word also is, you've been running with Andre Knox. He paused. The smirk faded. Andre Knox was no small-time thug. He ran a local crew known for chop shops, illegal street racing, and intimidating black-owned businesses trying to go legit. Zariah stared him down. I don't need that energy here. Ruben's eyes narrowed. Careful, Z. This whole thing, it's cute, inspiring, even, but it's also making some people nervous. Let them be nervous. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You think Saxon Vale cares about you? You're a good story. That's it. When the next scandal hits, you'll be old news. Zariah didn't flinch. I'd rather be a good story than a coward hiding behind threats. Ruben backed off, smirking again. All right, your choice. Just remember you weren't the first to try something like this, and they didn't last long. He walked out, leaving the door swinging behind him. Zariah stood there, pulse steady, eyes locked on the future. She didn't know how deep this went, whether it was local resentment, corporate politics, or both. But she knew one thing. She wasn't backing down. This garage wasn't just a job. It was her legacy. And no amount of sabotage or secrets was going to stop her from building it. The invitation came on a Monday. A local nonprofit Women Who Build was hosting its annual empowerment gala. Zariah Monroe was requested to be the keynote speaker. Her first instinct was to say no. Not because she was afraid. She'd faced far worse than a microphone. But because she didn't see herself as the kind of person who gave speeches in ballrooms. She was more grease than glitter. But Saxon encouraged her. They want your story, he said. Not a script. So she agreed. The night of the event, she stood behind the curtain of a hotel ballroom, listening as the MC introduced her. A woman whose courage turned a moment into a movement. Please welcome Zariah Monroe. The applause started before she stepped out. It wasn't deafening, but it was warm. Real. She walked up slowly, wearing a tailored navy jumpsuit that Nia helped her pick out. No heels, just clean boots and quiet confidence. Her hair was braided down her back. No makeup, just lip balm and truth. The podium felt too tall, the lights too bright, but when she gripped the edges and looked out, she saw faces young and old, polished and weathered, watching with hope, not judgment. So she started. Good evening. I'm not used to microphones. I'm used to wrenches. I'm not used to stages. I'm used to garages that leak and fluorescent lights that flicker. A soft chuckle rolled through the crowd. I grew up thinking people like me weren't meant for moments like this, that we had to stay small, stay quiet, stay grateful for whatever we were given, even when what we were given wasn't nearly enough. She paused, took a breath. 2 months ago, I was a waitress who knew more about engines than espresso. I fixed a stranger's car in the rain and didn't think much of it. But that moment, just doing what felt normal to me, was caught on video. And suddenly, the world was paying attention. She looked out, eyes clear. But here's what they didn't see in that video. They didn't see the nights I came home with aching feet and empty pockets. They didn't see the slurs whispered under breath when I served coffee with a smile. They didn't see my sister at home, studying by flashlight because the power was out. Or me in the back alley on break, watching engine tutorials instead of TikToks. Silence filled the room. No movement, no murmurs, just listening. They saw the kindness, but they missed the cost. She let that sit for a moment. But I'm here tonight not because I got lucky. I'm here because I was ready. Ready for a chance. Ready for change. And now, I get to lead a program that teaches young women, especially those who look like me, how to take control of their futures. Not through handouts, but through horsepower. Another round of soft laughter and applause. I've learned that the hardest part isn't getting the opportunity. It's believing you're worthy of it. And I want every girl in New Orleans, every woman who's ever been told she's too loud, too poor, too black, too rough around the edges. I want her to know, you are more than worthy, you are necessary. Her voice steadied. Every bolt I tighten, every class I teach, every life we touch in that garage, it's all part of something bigger, a blueprint for possibility. She glanced down at her notes, then folded them and slid them aside. I had this whole speech written, but the truth is, you don't need perfection, you need proof. And I'm standing here as living proof that one moment of kindness, one act of character, can change everything. The audience rose. A standing ovation. Zariah didn't cry, she never did, but she felt the tears pressing behind her eyes, quiet and hot, not from sadness but from release. This was her turning point. Not because the room applauded, but because she no longer needed permission to lead. Later that night, she stepped out onto the hotel balcony, heels in hand, the city glowing beneath her. Saxon joined her quietly. "You crushed it," he said. "I spoke the truth," she replied. "That's all I know how to do." "You're changing things." She looked at him. "No, we are." For the first time in her life, Zariah Monroe wasn't just surviving. She was building something that would outlive her. And that was the real beginning. The first time someone called her Miss Monroe, Zariah almost didn't answer. She'd been used to names like, "Hey girl," or "Ma'am," if the customer felt polite. Sometimes no name at all, just a finger snap or a nod toward the coffee pot. Years of working in diners had taught her to keep her head down, to serve without being seen, to exist in the background of someone else's comfort. But now things were different. Now, she had an office. Nothing fancy, just a small room off the side of the garage with a desk that wobbled if you leaned too hard and a window that looked out over the lot. But it was hers. On the door was a plaque. Zariah Monroe, Program Director, Vale Foundation Auto Initiative. Every morning, she unlocked the front gate herself. She arrived before the trainees and left after they'd gone. She swept the floors when no one else did. She organized toolkits, restocked supplies, and made sure the coffee machine worked because she knew what it was like to start your day tired. But more than anything, she led. Not with a clipboard. Not with orders. She led with presence. She watched her students closely, not just their hands on the tools but the way they carried themselves, the hesitations, the doubts. She recognized them because they used to live in her too. There was Jasmine, who never spoke above a whisper and flinched every time someone corrected her. There was Talia, who came in late 3 times a week because she had to drop her little brother at school. And Simone, who had the strongest hands Zariah had ever seen but didn't believe she was good enough to work under a hood. Zariah didn't just teach them how to change oil or align wheels. She taught them how to stand tall. She taught them how to fail out loud and try again. She gave them space to mess up without shame and start over without apology. She shared her story not because it was glamorous, but because it was honest. She told them about the time a customer poured water on her shoes for bringing the wrong order. About the night she walked 6 blocks in the rain just to catch the last bus home. About the night she met a man with a broken car and a billion-dollar empire. That part always made them laugh. "You serious?" Jasmine once asked. "A billionaire?" Zariah grinned. "Dead battery, expensive shoes, and no clue how to pop a hood, I swear." They didn't just learn from her, they trusted her. And that made all the difference. Word began to spread. Not just in New Orleans, but in Baton Rouge, Houston, even Memphis. Mechanics across the region reached out, asking about the program. City officials came by to observe. A representative from the Department of Labor asked if Zariah would consider turning her curriculum into a national pilot. She took every meeting, asked questions, took notes. She didn't pretend to know everything, but she knew enough to keep learning. Saxon visited once a month. He didn't wear suits anymore when he came, just jeans and a black tee, hands in pockets, watching from the sidelines. "You built this," he told her one afternoon as she handed him a wrench during a brake pad demo. Zariah shook her head. "We did." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You ever think about going bigger?" "Always," she said. But even as the vision grew, she never forgot where it started. One night, after locking up, Zariah stood alone in the garage. The echo of her footsteps, the scent of motor oil and soap, the quiet hum of the streetlight outside, it all felt sacred. She looked at the wall where the very first news article about her had been framed. The headline read, "Waitress goes viral after helping billionaire in the rain." She read it, then looked around. "No," she whispered. Leader builds future after surviving the storm. She took the article down and replaced it with a new one. It simply said, Zariah Monroe, director, mentor, mechanic, movement. Because that's what she had become. Not a moment. A movement. Years later, no one remembered the make or model of the car Zariah jump-started that night. What they remembered was the moment. The moment a young black waitress, exhausted from another shift of being overlooked, stepped into the rain not for attention, not for praise, but because it was the right thing to do. They remembered how that moment changed everything. Zariah Monroe never wanted fame. She never chased headlines. What she wanted always was a way forward. For herself, for her sister. For girls who looked like her and had been told to sit still, smile nicely, and stay in their place. She didn't stay. She moved. She built. She led. By the time the 10th training garage opened under the Hidden Worth banner, Zariah wasn't just a mechanic, or a program director, or a community leader. She was a symbol. Not of perfection, but of persistence. Not of a fairy tale, but of a future earned, bolt by bolt, decision by decision. Her story wasn't perfect. There were days she wanted to quit, days the hate mail stung louder than the support, days she stood in empty garages, wondering if it was all a mistake, but she kept showing up. And that's the lesson. Kindness doesn't always reward you immediately. Character doesn't guarantee comfort. Doing the right thing might not get you applause, it might get you silence, or mockery, or sabotage. But it still matters. Because every act of goodness, no matter how small, creates a ripple. Zariah's ripple became a wave. A wave that opened doors, changed minds, and proved once and for all that a waitress with grease on her hands and fire in her heart could reshape an entire industry. So maybe you're listening to this and thinking, I'm not special, I'm just getting by. I don't have the money, the platform, the connections. Neither did she. She had the courage to care. And sometimes, that's enough. That's the beginning. So the next time you see someone in need, someone who's stuck, struggling, or invisible, ask yourself, what would it cost me to help? And what might it change if I did? Because you never know who you're helping. And you never know who you're becoming in the process. This has been Hidden Worth, where we bring you the untold stories of grit, heart, and quiet greatness. If Zariah's journey moved you, do one thing today. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that the smallest act of kindness can become the spark for something incredible. And if you're not already part of our community, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more to come. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate your worth even when the world can't see it yet.